Picture this. For millions of years, humanity watched the skies with just absolute terror. When the heavy rain began to fall and those dark clouds rolled in, our ancestors knew exactly what was coming. And honestly, who could blame them? This was a force that commanded absolute respect. It was completely untamed, wildly destructive, and utterly incomprehensible to them. I mean, it could obliterate ancient forests in the blink of an eye, strike down massive animals, and ignite these raging, unstoppable fires across the landscape. And then, almost as quickly as it arrived, it would just completely vanish, leaving nothing but smoke and ash in its wake before anyone could even begin to figure out what had just happened.
As the winds howled and the storms raged, you can imagine early humans desperately trying to make sense of this unpredictable, raw power of nature. People truly, genuinely believed they were witnessing the literal anger of the gods pouring down from the heavens. Others were absolutely convinced it was some kind of ancient dark magic at work. I mean, entire cultures worshipped it. They would bow down to the violent skies, trying their hardest to appease a force that was entirely, completely out of their control. They lived at the absolute mercy of the elements.
But no one back then could have ever imagined what the future held. Standing there in the mud, shivering from the thunderous roar from above, they could never have dreamed that one day this terrifying, mysterious force would actually be tamed, that it would be captured to power every single city on the planet, every supercomputer, every global network, and literally the very device you are using to watch this explainer right now.
Welcome to The Explainer. I am so pumped you're here with us today because we are diving into the incredible story of how humanity captured lightning. We're going to go on a cinematic journey together, tracing our steps from a species living in absolute terror of the dark to achieving ultimate mastery over one of the fundamental forces of nature. It is an epic story of discovery, obsession, and the brilliant minds that permanently altered the trajectory of human civilization. Let's get into it.
Section 1. A World in Darkness. Okay, I want you to really take a second and imagine living in a world completely swallowed by shadow. For the vast, vast majority of human history, when the sun disappeared below the horizon, your world literally stopped. Human progress just ground to a halt every single evening. There was no internet, there were no modern hospitals to save lives, no refrigerators to keep your food safe, no massive factories building our everyday conveniences, no TV, no elevators, no airplanes soaring through the night sky, and definitely no computers. Every sunset basically meant just surviving another long night, illuminated by nothing but the faint, flickering glow of a fire. The average person lived and died having never, ever seen an artificial light brighter than a single candle. Now, think about the stark contrast between that era and today. Back then, your life was dictated entirely by the rhythm of nature. You were isolated. When night fell, your entire universe shrank to the few feet illuminated by a hearth. Today, we casually flip a switch on the wall without giving it a second thought. We have global communication, life-saving medical equipment, instant access to basically all human knowledge. That simple, everyday action of turning on a light represents one of humanity's absolute greatest achievements. Electricity didn't just, slightly improve human civilization. It fundamentally and permanently transformed what it means to be human.
Section 2. Chasing the Spark.
So long before modern scientists understood the complex physics of electricity, people were actually already noticing something strange happening in the natural world. They were observing things that seemed completely unexplainable, almost supernatural, really. And the crazy thing is, the very first clues didn't come from massive, booming lightning storms, but from something incredibly small and seemingly ordinary. Humanity was quite literally staring directly at one of nature's greatest invisible forces for over 2,000 years without realizing what it was. Way back in 600 BCE, Thales observes a really strange physical attraction. But then, fast forward a massive stretch of time to the 1750s, and scientists in Europe are only just starting to study static sparks. Then, bam! 1752, Benjamin Franklin does his famous kite experiment. And finally, by 1800, Volta creates a continuous flow of power. It took millennia of staring at a mystery before we made the rapid breakthroughs that built our modern era.
It is absolutely fascinating to see where this all actually started. So around 600 BCE, the Greek philosopher Thales of Miletus made this curious little observation. He noticed that if you took a piece of fossilized tree resin, which we call amber, and you rubbed it with animal fur, it would suddenly attract tiny feathers and dust. It looked exactly like magic, just a simple parlor trick. The Greeks called this amber electron. Thousands of years later, that single ancient word for a piece of glowing resin would become the root for the word electricity.
Honestly, it's incredible to think that this tiny, mysterious attraction held the secret to the most powerful force in our modern world. Right, so by the 1700s, scientists all across Europe had become completely obsessed with electricity. They knew static electricity could produce these tiny, shocking sparks in a laboratory setting, but there was this massive question hanging in the air. Was the lightning up in the sky the exact same thing as the tiny sparks in their glass jars? So in 1752, the American inventor Benjamin Franklin proposed a bold, pretty dangerous experiment. During a violent thunderstorm, he flew a kite with a metal key attached to the string. Now, he actually captured lightning. Well, actually, scratch that. He didn't capture lightning directly. That is a very common historical myth. His actual goal was to demonstrate that storm clouds carried an electrical charge. And this incredibly famous experiment directly led to his invention of the lightning rod, which went on to save countless buildings and lives from fiery destruction. For the very first time, people finally realized that lightning wasn't magic, and it wasn't divine anger. It was electricity.
But here is the crucial point. Merely understanding that electricity existed in the clouds or in static sparks wasn't nearly enough to change the world. The real towering challenge for humanity was figuring out how to actually produce it whenever people needed it, on demand. And that massive breakthrough arrived in the year 1900. An Italian scientist named Alessandro Volta created the very first practical electric battery. Guys, this was absolutely revolutionary. For the first time in all of human history, humans could generate a continuous, steady flow of electric current rather than just a quick, unpredictable spark. We finally, literally had the power in our hands.
Let's move forward and see how this builds into the modern world, because this next part is mind-blowing. A few years after Volta, a brilliant scientist named Michael Faraday asked a completely different, paradigm-shifting question. He thought, instead of using chemicals to make electricity, could electricity be created through physical motion? His experiments with magnets completely changed the course of history. He discovered electromagnetic induction, which works in 3 simple steps. Step 1, magnets generate a magnetic field. Step 2, motion is introduced within that field. And step 3, continuous electricity is created. This exact principle is the foundation of nearly every single modern power station on Earth. Every time a massive turbine spins today, whether it's powered by rushing water in a giant dam, wind catching massive blades, steam from coal, or nuclear energy, it follows this exact same fundamental principle that Faraday uncovered.
Section 3. The War of Currents.
So, as the ability to generate electricity spread, a massive, high-stakes battle began. But this wasn't fought on a traditional battlefield with armies and weapons. No, this was an epic clash of industrial titans fought in laboratories, wealthy boardrooms, and the torn-up city streets of a rapidly industrializing nation. The prize? Nothing less than the power to illuminate the entire globe. On one side of this intense rivalry, you had the legendary Thomas Edison, who fiercely believed in direct current, or DC. Now, DC worked very well, but mostly over short distances. On the exact opposite side stood the brilliant Nikola Tesla, heavily supported by the industrialist George Westinghouse. They championed alternating current, or AC. The fundamental technical difference here was that AC could travel much, much farther across vast distances with far less energy loss. Ultimately, because of this sheer efficiency over hundreds of miles, AC became the undisputed global standard for electrical power distribution. And this wasn't just some nerdy technical debate. The victor literally shaped the entire electrical infrastructure that powers much of the modern world we live in today.
Section 4. The Invisible River.
Now, what's really interesting here is when you pause for a moment and truly reflect on what we've built. Imagine your life without this invisible force. If it just vanished right now, everything goes dark. No smartphones to connect with your friends and family. No satellites orbiting the Earth. No modern transportation systems moving millions of people around. No artificial intelligence solving complex problems, and no massive data centers holding the sum of human knowledge. Electricity is so deeply, intricately woven into the very fabric of our modern survival and progress that we rarely even notice it until, the power goes out. Behind every single modern action flows this invisible river of electrons. Every click you make online, every search query you type, every video you stream, every single piece of life-saving machinery in a hospital, every humming data center. All of it is entirely dependent on our mastery of the spark.
Lightning once sent humanity fleeing in absolute terror into dark caves. Today, that exact same force hums quietly through cables, powering sprawling, glowing cities across the entire planet. As the saying goes, what was once feared became understood. What was once mysterious became measurable. What ancient people truly believed was the magic of angry gods became one of the single greatest scientific achievements in all of human history. We took the most frightening thing in the sky, and we literally built the modern world with it.
This epic story of electricity reminds us of something truly extraordinary. The universe we live in is still absolutely filled to the brim with incredible mysteries. Every generation manages to solve a few, bringing a little more light to the darkness, but they always leave even greater questions for the next generation to tackle. So it leaves me with this final thought. What will the next world-changing discovery be? And perhaps more importantly, will it come from someone watching this very explainer right now?